I think
Okay,
it.
sir. Yes, sir. It is on, sir. Sir, your mic is mute. Yes, sir. Now you can start, sir.
Okay, friends, today we are going to discuss an interesting topic of diabetes and thyroid in pregnancy. First of all, I would like to thank Lifecell for their initiative in arranging such interesting webinars, and we would go one by one on many of the different topics. So today's topic is quite common. We are now seeing day to day in our practice that pregnancy is detected, and later on we find that the normal lady goes into diabetes during pregnancy, which is called gestational diabetes, or appears to have thyroid in pregnancy, and then she goes into tension. So, what is the role of diabetes and thyroid in pregnancy? How it affects the pregnancy, and what care should be done? Let us discuss those things. So, diabetes is a devastating disease. It's also considered to be a slow killer. Diabetes in various forms affects a large number of humans, about 422 million worldwide. Medical science has reached to a significant milestone in decoding mystery of diabetes and minimizing its ill effects. Still a lot has to be done. It is estimated that gestational diabetes, which is a specific form of diabetes appearing only in pregnancy, affects around 7 to 10% of all pregnancies worldwide. So, if somebody can find a proper cure for diabetes or say gestational diabetes, they would be doing a great service to humanity. So, now the glucose is the actually energy to the body. So, if the fuel is to the cars, glucose is to the cells. The cells need glucose to generate energy in the form of ATP by cellular respiration. The action occurs in mitochondria, which are aptly called the powerhouse of the cell. So, if glucose is not available in the cell, the functioning will stop. Interestingly, this powerhouse, that is power generation, occurring in mitochondria, is actually affected by the mitochondrial DNA, which is purely maternal in origin. And maternal link can be traced back to generations. So, if you see forensic science or even genetic science, you will understand that the mitochondrial DNA is very specifically coming from maternal genes only. And so, if you try to trace back, you will be able to uh, check the generations and generations of mothers. So, that is why our Vedas are telling that woman or mother is called the powerhouse of human being, and the whole energy generation occurs in mitochondria. Now, the balance of glucose in the body. The balance of glucose in the body is maintained by two basic hormones. One is called insulin, secreted by the alpha cells, and glucagon, which is secreted by the beta cells in a small organ called pancreas. And at the part of pancreas only, which form the islets of Langerhans, they are the producers of insulin. Insulin has a tendency to lower down the blood glucose level when it is higher side. For example, when after taking a heavy meal, and glucagon is the hormone which rises the blood sugar level when it is on lower side, that is before meals or on empty stomach. So with the balance of glucagon and insulin, the body miraculously maintains the blood glucose level in a narrow range. When that range is disturbed because of the number of factors like inactivation of insulin, low production of insulin, or less effect of insulin because of insulin resistance, then diabetes will appear. In the same way, if insulin is overworking, then sugar will go. It's called hypoglycemia. Now, what is the role of insulin in glucose? Now, this basic thing has to be understood. Actually, sugar is absorbed from intestine, and once it reaches the inside the body in the blood, it has to enter the cell for its the mitochondria where it will work. Now, to enter the cell membrane, it requires insulin so that it can go inside the cell. So that insulin works on insulin receptors and activates certain other receptors like GLUT receptor, which will allow the glucose to go inside the cell. So if insulin is not there, most of the cell of our body are unable to bring glucose from the blood into the cell. So as if you understand this mechanism, you can see that without insulin, glucose cannot enter the cells for further utilization. So interestingly, a diabetic person may have a blood sugar of 250, that is high level of sugar in the blood, but his cells are deprived of glucose and energy. So when glucose is not available, these cells will start malfunctioning and shrink. And that is why we have seen that a diabetic person normally will start losing weight. That is because the cells will not work properly. Only exceptions to this kind of cells are some organs like brain, kidney, and RBC, which can utilize glucose without insulin. These are very, very important organs. So nature is designed in such a way that these organs do not require insulin for glucose uptake. The type of diabetes. The type of diabetes is broadly divided. There are a number of other divisions, but it is broadly divided into type 1 diabetes, which is characterized by loss or decreased production of insulin hormone. It is insulin dependent because it is less production of insulin which is creating the diabetes. It is about 15% of all cases, and it is found in childhood. Type 2 diabetes is characterized by insensitivity to insulin, that is insulin resistance. Non-insulin dependent diabetes. Here the insulin level is there, but it is not able to adequately work on the cells. About 85% of all cases will be type 2 diabetes. Most often found in over 40 years above patients. And third broad classification would be gestational diabetes mellitus, which resembles type 2 kind of diabetes in several aspects, involving a combination of relatively inadequate insulin secretion and responsiveness. So overall incidence of gestational diabetes is increasing worldwide, and even type 2 diabetes is increasing worldwide. So what dilemma it presents? Gestational diabetes is a dilemma because overall the pregnancy is a diabetogenic state. That means that early pregnancy leads to lower blood glucose and lower blood pressure also. This explains the giddiness, fainting, and morning sickness as common symptoms in early pregnancy. So normally we should find low blood sugars in early pregnancy. The balance in pregnancy changes in a different way. As we saw previously, the balance of sugar or glucose is between insulin and glucagon. Now here, when pregnancy occurs, there are some other hormones which will start working against insulin. So I would enumerate the different hormones. So one is cortisol. Second is progesterone, which is the basic hormone which protects the pregnancy. Now, when progesterone level increases, it will work against insulin and it will try to increase the sugar level. There is a major hormone called human placental lactogen, or it is also called nowadays as human placental somatomamotropin. Now, this is secreted from placenta, that is the organ which supplies oxygen to the baby and nutrition to the baby. And it is structurally and functionally similar to growth hormone. But this hormone is very much against, it is an anti of insulin. So it tries to increase the sugar level. Then there is a hormone called prolactin. Obviously, as soon as pregnancy occurs, the prolactin starts increasing and it will remain elevated even in lactation also. Prolactin is the hormone which induces lactation or milk production in the breast. And estradiol. So these are the 5 hormones which are against insulin in pregnancy. Moreover, increase in fat deposits occur during pregnancy. And this also seems to mediate insulin resistance during pregnancy. So if we see, it is exactly like it is practically fighting against all the above factors. The insulin is practically fighting against all the other hormones in maintaining the glucose homeostasis. As pregnancy advances, insulin resistance also increases. So when it is not able to fight, at some point, gestational diabetes is unmasked. So how do you diagnose? The basis of diagnosis is mostly a test called glucose tolerance test. A lot of you must be knowing what is glucose tolerance test. So it's like a challenge. The basis is to give a glucose load and see the response of the body against that glucose. There are different methods of glucose tolerance test which have been recommended by different associations. And most of them give a glucose load of either 100 gram or 75 gram or 50 gram, either on fasting or on a random thing, and then see the glucose level. And if the glucose level are beyond certain range, then gestational diabetes can be identified. There are tests which will also give you long-term control of sugar. One of the very important tests is called HbA1c, that is glycated hemoglobin. Gives a reflection of a long-term glycemic control of last 2 to 3 months. Nowadays, another assay is also possible, which is called fructosamine assay, which is measuring glycated albumin and can be used, which will be reflecting the glycemic status over last 2 weeks. So if we want to see what is the control in last 2 weeks, you can do fructosamine assay. Or if you want to see longer term control like 2 months or 3 months, then HbA1c is a good indicator. So even though today's sugar level may be normal, the HbA1c will reflect that your control was not good in last 1 or 2 months. When it should be tested in pregnancy? Now, as normally, those who have a history of diabetes before planning pregnancy, the test is important. But most of the time, the pregnant woman will come to us after getting pregnancy. So, as soon as patient comes to us, a pregnant woman should be screened earlier, because the effect of gestational diabetes to the fetus also starts very early. So, initial screening is of paramount importance. We do it as early in first trimester as possible. And later on, pregnant women who have a normal level should be screened at 28 weeks of pregnancy, because this is the time where there is highest load of pregnancy on the glucose metabolism. And so all the hormones which are against insulin are working heavily at this 28 to 30 weeks time. And so unmasking of gestational diabetes is most likely at around 28 weeks of pregnancy. So we always repeat it at 28 weeks. Urine glucose monitoring is not useful in GDM. This we have to keep in mind. And this is due to the fact that renal threshold is lowered in pregnancy. So the kidney starts secreting urine, sugar in urine. And that is why if you find sugar in urine in pregnancy, you don't have to get panicky, don't have to worry, because your blood sugar level may be normal. This is a generalization. There are different guidelines and different associations like American Diabetic Association, international associations have given different levels. But on an average, fasting glucose level should not be higher than 95. Now, just keep in mind, for a non-pregnant person, this level would not be 95 but 110. 1 hour after fasting, not higher than 120, and 2 hours after eating, no higher than 140. So beyond that, we would put it as a gestational diabetes. Why this testing is important? Why we should be worried about gestational diabetes? Because uncontrolled gestational diabetes can create number of complications in pregnancy. The first trimester, that is the first 3 months, is the most important time. We know that the pregnancy grows in 3 phases: first 3 months, middle 3 months, and last 3 months. The first 3 months is period of organogenesis, that is organ formation. So if you see at the end of first 3 months, you will find that the baby is fully formed with almost all organs, but it is a miniature. So during this time, if sugar level is not good, then there may be developmental problems. So in first 3 months, there can be increased risk of abortion also, and the development of fetal abnormality, because the organ formation is occurring, and if sugar level is high, there are higher chance in those patients that abnormality will develop in the child. So first trimester, we have to be very vigilant in controlling the sugar level. In the second and third trimester, the GDM of any severity increases the risk of fetal macrosomia. Now, what is the macrosomia? Macrosomia is the excessive growth of the fetal tissue. So the baby's weight increases, the shoulder becomes bigger in size, and overall the size of the baby is bigger. That is macrosomia. Later on, after birth, neonatal hypoglycemia, that is the low sugar level, jaundice in the newborn, polycythemia, hypocalcemia, that is a low calcium level, and hypomagnesemia, that is low magnesium level, can be found. Undetected neonatal hypoglycemia can lead to eye damage and brain damage. This is a very, very common finding and is generally neglected. After the birth, it is normally not the tendency for sugar testing in the baby. And in gestational diabetes patients, hypoglycemia in the newborn immediately after birth is very common, and this is very dangerous because a low sugar in the early phase of life can lead to brain damage or eye damage. Even gestational diabetes is also associated with an increased risk of intrauterine fetal death during the last 4 to 8 weeks of gestation. So we have to be very vigilant in last 1 month, 1.5 months of gestation. There can be, if everything is also going on normally, there can be intrauterine fetal death. Gestational diabetes mellitus is also associated with intrauterine growth retardation. So the baby's growth can be restricted. Pregnancy complications can be more in those patients who have got gestational diabetes mellitus. That is either premature delivery, shoulder dystocia, that is the baby's head will come, and then the shoulder, because they are bigger in size, because of the fetal macrosomia, they will not be able to come. And so the doctor will have to pull the head of the baby to deliver the child, which can lead to devastating results to the baby. Or birth injury can occur. Intensive neonatal care may be required. There can be hyperbilirubinemia, that is the jaundice can appear. And in pregnancy, preeclampsia with increased incidence of cesarean section can occur in cases of gestational diabetes mellitus. After the birth, the first thing we have to take care is the acute respiratory distress in the baby. Normally, when pregnancy is there, at around 32 to 34 weeks of pregnancy, there is appearance of a chemical in the lungs of the baby, which is called surfactant. Now, this surfactant is a very, very important chemical. It actually allows the lungs to expand at the time of delivery by reducing the surface tension of the alveoli. The fetal lung is actually filled with water, fluid, that is amniotic fluid, when the baby is inside the womb. But as soon as the baby comes out and takes the first gasp of breath, the fluid in the lungs is actually replaced by air, atmospheric air. Now, this requires that the lung has to fully expand at that time. And this expansion is dependent on this chemical, which is surfactant. When diabetes is there, the appearance of surfactant is sometimes late in pregnancy. So, because of that, there is increased incidence of respiratory distress in the newborn. This can be actually prevented or avoided by giving corticosteroid therapy to induce lung maturation before the delivery in those patients who have gestational diabetes. Now, how to manage once you find that there is a diabetic patient who is having pregnancy? Now, if those who are already diabetic should first have a tight control of diabetes before entering pregnancy, as reflected by its HbA1c, not a single report, but go for HbA1c. And if the HbA1c is controlled, that indicates that the last 1 or 2 months of control is good, and then pregnancy should be attempted. But those patients who are normal, non-diabetic, then early screening for gestational diabetes has to be done in all those pregnant ladies who come with pregnancy in first trimester, which has to be repeated at 28 to 30 weeks of pregnancy. The key to success of managing a gestational diabetic patient is early diagnosis of developing GDM and controlling it. A general treatment plan to control gestational diabetes may include different steps. The most important is monitoring blood sugar level and keeping it under control. Second is getting regular, moderate physical activity. Third is eating a healthy diet as outlined by your healthcare provider. Then maintaining a healthy weight gain. Keeping daily records of your diet, physical activity, taking insulin and other medications as prescribed for treating gestational diabetes. If you take care of all these things, you will have no problem in pregnancy. So first we will take monitoring. How do you monitor? The vigilant monitoring of blood sugar in those who are having gestational diabetes is a must. Now this monitoring cannot be done only by blood reports done in laboratory. So you require a home glucometer, which is a must. Nowadays, very good quality home glucometers are available. The prick is very minimal, so you don't even feel that there is a prick, and it requires minimum of blood for getting quite an accurate level of sugar. So as soon as gestational diabetes is detected, the first step is to get a home glucometer. Now the test to be done is not one. This is a normal misbelief that you do a 1-2 hour sugar or a fasting sugar and that will tell you that everything is okay. Once you are detected with gestational diabetes, a proper monitoring requires a fasting level, that is total empty stomach, at least 8 hours of fasting. So in the morning time, fasting level, then a pre-lunch level, that is just before taking the lunch, you take a sugar level. Then note your lunch time. 2 hours post lunch, you take another sugar level. Then you take pre-dinner and 2 hours post dinner every week. This should be repeated as necessary until the sugar level comes under control with medicine and other proper exercise and other lifestyle changes. And then every 15 days, you should do this. So a single day where all these tests are done will give you adequate idea about the control of your blood sugar. Keep a proper record in a diary. HbA1c is an important parameter, but it has to be done a few times, not every 15 days because it's a long-term control of your sugar. So if your these 5 reports, 4 to 5 reports are normal of a day, that indicates that you are having a good control. Exercise. Moderate exercise is of paramount importance. It is a very well-known fact that muscles can utilize glucose without insulin when they are active. So if you are into active mode, when you are walking, for example, the muscles are working, and normally, as I told you, that glucose is required to take glucose from the blood into the cells for metabolism. This is an exception. So when you are walking or when you are working or doing exercise, the muscles can utilize the glucose without insulin. So this will bring the sugar level under control without changes of insulin. The schedule should be fixed. That is very important. So you plan a schedule, how you will walk. Don't go on changing. And so the variation in schedule can lead to fluctuation of glucose. Walk is one of the best exercise which will be reducing your sugar levels consistently. So don't go for very heavy exercise, but a planned exercise which is a fixed amount every day. So all exercises are important, and you can take guidance of the physiotherapist for those exercises. Diet. Balanced diet is very important. A healthy diet is the one that includes a balance of foods from all food groups, giving you the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals needed for a healthy pregnancy. For women with gestational diabetes, such a diet also helps to keep blood sugar levels in a healthy target range. It is better that those who have gestational diabetes should consult a nutritionist who will give you a balanced diet, idea of the diet, and a diet chart will be given so that you can even do variations in the diet. All food have glycemic index. This is a thing which you should explore. The glycemic index is a relative ranking of carbohydrate in the food according to how they affect the blood glucose levels. Carbohydrates with low GI value, that is 55 or less, are more slowly digested, absorbed, and metabolized, and cause a lower and slower rise in blood glucose, and therefore usually insulin levels also. Each food item has a glycemic index, and food item having higher glycemic index will increase the blood sugar level faster than one with the lower index. So if you eat more food with lower glycemic index, your sugar level will not shoot up quickly, and that will be very, very good for pregnancy gestational diabetes. This is a chart which explains the glycemic index of different food. You can go on internet and find such charts very easily. But as you see, some food have up to 10 glycemic index. Some have 10 to 30 glycemic index, 30 to 50. So until these are very good food for you. Beyond this, that is 50 to 70 and 70 to 100 glycemic index are not good for gestational diabetic patients. For example, you can see that banana has got higher glycemic index. Dates have a very high glycemic index, so they should be avoided once you are detected with gestational diabetes mellitus. This is a chart again readily available on internet. You can always check it out. And for any food, it is like a ready reckoner. You can see the glycemic index of that food and decide how much to eat. But overall, your nutritionist will help a lot in giving you a balanced diet, as well as the way how to keep changes in the diet so that it doesn't become monotonous for you. Every day the same kind of food is not palatable. So you can go on having change and replace certain food with other type of food daily. Importance of fiber cannot be underestimated. Get more fiber in your diet. Fiber is the part of the plant foods that your body cannot digest actually, like skins, seeds, and bran. But they have a very important role to play. Because the fiber slows down digestion and absorption of nutrients, it can also help to control your blood sugar level. So whenever you eat any fruit don't take fruit juice. It is not good. It is better that you eat the whole fruit with the skin, so that the fiber goes, and this fiber will help to retard the sugar in absorption from your intestine. And interestingly, the fruits contain fructose. Most of the fruit will contain fructose, which are sugar, which are little complex sugar. So they will have to get disintegrated in the body to work. So because of that, the glucose release is slower. So most of the time it is better. But if you take fruit juice, the fiber is removed from the fruit juice, and because of that, the sugar will go up quickly. And the ready-made fruit juices, which are available in the market as canned one, most of them contains a large amount of sugar to make it palatable, and so they are not good. Foods that are part of healthy diet, like fruits, vegetables, and legumes, beans and peas, are also good sources of dietary fiber. The fiber also has a very important role to play to prevent constipation, because it forms bulk, and that prevents constipation also. Importance of milk and milk product. This cannot be underestimated again. Pregnant women has to increase the amount of milk they drink to make sure they get enough of calcium. Milk is one of the best sources of calcium and of other nutrients that help the body absorb calcium. 1 gram of calcium is available from about average 1 liter of milk. Pregnancy requirements is 1.2 grams per day. So that is why we supplement in the tablet form also. But milk products are of paramount importance in pregnancy. In most cases, the fat-free or low-fat milk and milk products are the best calcium options, because they contain the calcium and other nutrients without adding fat. Fat-free and 1% milks are among the suggested options, but some patients may have lactose intolerance, and in those cases, you have to search for lactose-free options, which are also available in the market. But overall, calcium requirement is high, and milk products are important, and milk products generally have a lower glycemic index, so that is a big advantage. Don't drink sweet drinks, for example, Thumbs Up, Coke, if you have gestational diabetes, because they will shoot up your sugar level very quickly. Research published in BMC Women's Health shows a strong correlation between not getting enough sleep and the risk of gestational diabetes. So a pregnant woman has to take adequate sleep. That is very important. Otherwise, she is also likely to end up with diabetes. This is actually because that if you are stressed out and if you do not get adequate sleep, your cortisol level will increase, and that corticosteroids which are against the insulin, and so they induce gestational diabetes. Weight gain in pregnancy. The weight gain in pregnancy has to be linked to your BMI. That is the calculation. How it is done, I will tell you. You can use any online BMI calculator to work out your pre-pregnancy BMI. It is the weight in kilograms divided by square of your height in meters. So I will give you an example. If you are weighing 68 kg and you are 170 centimeter tall, your BMI calculation would be 68 divided by into meters, that is meter square, that is 1.7 into 1.7 meter, so is equal to 23.5. This is a good BMI in a good range. So if you are in a healthy weight range before becoming pregnant, that is the BMI of 18.5 to 24.9, that is considered to be a healthy BMI, then you should ideally have a weight gain of about 11.5 kg to 16 kg maximum. Particularly 1 to 1.5 kg in the first 3 months. Even in first 3 months, a lot of patients, because of the hyperemesis and vomiting in pregnancy, lose a little bit of weight, but regularly then should have 1.5 to 2 kg per month weight gain until you give birth. But if your BMI, if you are above the healthy weight range, your BMI is on higher side, you should gain less. And if you are below the healthy weight range, you should gain more. So first check your BMI before going into pregnancy, and then adjust your increase of pregnancy weight gain accordingly to your BMI. most of the cases until now, the concept was that when pregnancy, gestational diabetes appears and sugar is detected in pregnancy, only way out was giving insulin to control sugar. But over a period of time, it has been found that some of the drugs are very safe in pregnancy, and lifestyle modification leads to a lot of change in the blood sugar level. So borderline cases of gestational diabetes mellitus are very well managed by drugs like metformin and acarbose along with lifestyle modification. Those with severe form will definitely require insulin therapy, which should be followed very strictly under vigilance of your endocrinologist and obstetrician, as it can lead to hypoglycemia and its own complications. So once gestational diabetes is detected, we have to be very vigilant in controlling it. Importance of breastfeeding cannot be underestimated. Exclusive breastfeeding, which means that the breast milk is the only source of the food for the child, is recommended for women who have gestational diabetes and for their babies. Research indicates that women could have better control over their weight and diabetic risk, as well as possibly improve their child's long-term health outcomes if they are breastfed exclusively. Now, commonly the question will come in patients who have gestational diabetes in their mind that what about my baby? The fact that you have gestational diabetes will not cause diabetes in your baby, but your child is at higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes later in life. As your child grows, things like eating a healthy diet, maintaining a healthy weight, and getting regular moderate physical activity may help to reduce that risk to the baby. On a long term, so once pregnancy is over, you will find that the gestational diabetes has practically disappeared and the sugar levels have come back to normal. But unfortunately, one bout of gestational diabetes increases your lifetime risk of developing permanent diabetes later in life by a factor of 7. So 7 times more chance. You are also at the risk of developing gestational diabetes again in next pregnancy. Most of the GDM patients revert back to normal state after delivery, but are at a high risk of developing diabetes on a long term. Some of the patients will still have continued diabetes. So ultimately, whether you end up with diabetes on a longer term later in the life will depend on your lifestyle changes, regular monitoring, and particularly weight loss. It is directly related with your insulin resistance and appearance of diabetes. So if the lady leads to weight loss, there is highly likely that she will never develop diabetes in life. So those who had gestational diabetes, the control of BMI, that is the weight, is of paramount importance. So immediately after delivery, avoid eating fatty foods and try to lose the weight which has been gained during pregnancy and come back to the pre-pregnancy level, and if possible into a healthy BMI level. Questions we will take later on after the second session, which is going to be on uh, pregnancy with thyroid complication. So that will be taken by Dr. Meena Amin.
Hello friends. Let me thank first LifeCell for such useful and important awareness program about two main common endocrine problems, that is diabetes and thyroid dysfunction, which is most common in the pregnant ladies. And there are lot many questions when it appears to. I will be taking in detail about the thyroid dysfunction during pregnancy and the challenges in its treatment. Now, regarding thyroid gland is the second master gland of the body after the pituitary gland, which is the master gland of the body. and basically it controls master gland is which is controlling the other glands endocrine function. So pituitary is the first master gland of the body, controlling all other endocrine functions like pancreas, which dysfunction can lead to diabetes, or adrenal glands, or thyroid glands. And thyroid is the being the second master gland, and the gonads also, ovary and testes, right? So regarding thyroid glands, thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland situated in the front of the neck, in front of the windpipe, as we can see in the figure. Now, the thyroid gland is a highly vascular organ, weighing almost 15 to 20 grams only. The name is derived from the Greek, meaning it's shield gland. It is like a shield. It has right and left lobe, and which are connected. Both lobes are connected with a isthmus. There are two physiologically potent amino acids which it secretes. That is L-thyroxine, levothyroxine, that is T4, and levotriiodothyronine, that is T3. So in discussion, we will be discussing it as a T4 and T3. These are the two amino acids which the gland produces. T3 is the active hormone and T4 is prohormone. So T4 gets converted to T3 as it is needed. Now, what is the regulatory mechanism for the thyroid gland? So, as I explained, there are some control over the each and every gland and check and balance system. So, hypothalamus is the most higher control, which releases TRH, that is thyroxine releasing hormone to pituitary gland. Pituitary gland will regulate the thyroid gland via thyroid stimulation hormone, that is thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH. And there is a negative feedback by T3 and T4, which will again stimulate pituitary for the further secretion of TRH or TSH. Now we are discussing regarding the changes that occurs in the pregnancy with the in reference to the thyroid gland. So first of all, we first primarily give the basic knowledge that thyroxine hormone or functioning of thyroid gland require raw material called iodine. So when during pregnancy, the dietary requirement of the iodine increases in pregnancy due to increased transplacental uptake. So child will have its own new development of organs, and it also will develop its own thyroid gland, and the placenta or the connection between mother and child which is supplying nutrients will transfer iodine to the child also. So dietary requirement goes high as there is pregnancy, and increase renal clearance, kidney will pass out more iodine, and placenta contains some hormone D3 which inactivates thyroid hormone. Second thing is there is rise in serum thyroid binding globulin. Certain globulins, certain proteins are increased because of the concentration of the estrogen level, that is hormone which increases during pregnancy. The thyroid remain more bound to the protein, and so the free thyroid available for its action is less. Third thing is elevation of free T4 and fall in the TSH level because of the increase in HCG. As there is pregnancy, there is secretion of human chorionic gonadotropin or HCG, which will be having effect like TSH, and as it has effect like TSH level should go down. There may be mild biochemical hypothyroidism in third trimester of pregnancy due to dilutional effect and the larger placenta which breaks down more and more of thyroid hormone. Now, if we consider thyroid normal requirement of iodine in non-pregnant women, it is 150 microgram. In pregnancy, it is about 220 microgram, and in lactating lady, it is 290 microgram. So WHO has recommended 250 microgram for all in general. Now we will discuss regarding the fetal thyroid. Fetal thyroid becomes active by 10th intrauterine gestational week. T4 from fetal thyroid is the main source. Main source of thyroxine hormone in the fetus is T4. During early weeks of development, thyroid hormones influence neuronal development, which is very, very important. Thyroid hormone receptors are present in the brain around 8 to 9 weeks of the gestation, a period which reflects rapid neuronal proliferation and growth. So, if in simplified language, if we explain, if brain has some 3 or 4 billions of the neurons or nerve cells, all are being formed earlier than 12 weeks of life. We call it a first trimester or first 3 months as a period of organogenesis. And thyroid play very, very important role in the neuronal development of the fetus. So, as we explained, it is at 8 or 9 weeks that the receptors are found in the fetal thyroid gland. Maternal TRH crosses the placenta and play its roles. So, maternal hypothalamic hormone which crosses the placenta and stimulate the thyroid gland of the fetus to function. TSH does not cross its placenta. These are the detail which explain which make you understand little how the play of TSH is important for monitoring the thyroid function, evaluating the requirement of the dose, how the clinician will set for the pregnant lady. Maternofetal transfer of T3 and T4 are minimal. So there is no maternal T3 and T4 which are directly transferred to the child, but about it is TRH which stimulate the thyroid gland of the child. Thus, fetal thyroid is a distinct endocrine entity. Now we will go for one important term, that is subclinical hypothyroidism. In early pregnancy, HCG also stimulate thyroid similar to TSH as we told, and so TSH level should decrease. It does not decrease, then it is called subclinical hypothyroidism. And up to 60% of such cases are not identified or treated. So if we skip the first trimester or the early pregnancy blood investigation regarding at least serum TSH level, we may miss or we may overlook the subclinical hypothyroidism and its consequences to the developing fetus. Subclinical hypothyroidism is associated with the higher incidence of abortion, preterm birth, low birth weight, and it has negative impact on neurocognitive development of the fetus. Neurocognitive development is the neurological development as well as its learning ability for the development of the skills, muscular skills, and the coordination of the muscles and finer movements. Now, hypothyroidism. There are different type of hypothyroidism. Sometimes we may not give very much detail as it will be too much theoretical. But no, if I enumerate, it is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is autoimmune disease, where there is apoptosis of the thyroid cells, and there is almost 90% of gland which is destroyed before its manifestation as a hypothyroidism. There may be another variety is iodine deficiency goiter. Third thing is iodine excess, even given, say sometime radioactive iodine has been given, it may inactivate thyroid gland for some time. It may be congenital hypothyroidism, which is 1 in 3,500, and we have to screen newborn that because 10 to 15% of these newborns have defect in thyroid hormone synthesis. Then there may be congenital atrophic hypothyroidism. There may be infiltrative like other major disease like amyloidosis, or there can be malignancy. Now there is another condition other than this, that is reverse, that is hyperthyroidism, where thyroid hormone is being produced in excess. Other than, we were talking about the hypothyroidism where the thyroxine hormone is being produced in the less amount than desired. Hyperthyroidism includes Graves' disease, in which there is TSH receptor is the primary autoantigen to Graves' disease. Antibodies bind to these TSH receptors and stimulate the gland. So there is more TSH stimulation, the gland will produce more and more thyroxine hormone. Another is Plummer's disease, or there is toxic adenoma. Adenoma is one kind of tumor. And there may be thyroid neoplasm or the malignancy which may produce excessive thyroid hormone. These are less common. More common is hypothyroidism and subclinical hypothyroidism, as we explained. So, if we discuss the full spectrum, it may be normal thyroid function, it may be subclinical hypothyroidism, it may be overt hypothyroidism, where thyroid hormones are low and TSH is elevated. Subclinical is thyroid hormones are normal, but only TSH is elevated. There may be central hypothyroidism, where thyroid hormones are also low and TSH is also low. Or there may be isolated hypothyroxemia, where there is low thyroid hormones with the normal TSH values. Now, we will consider important thing is symptom. How lady will have a even doubt of having the thyroid dysfunction. Certain basic symptoms which the person can immediately identify is intolerance to cold. The people, it is more common in female. First thing is, if there is hypothyroidism, out of 10, 8 will be female or 9 will be female. Second thing is, she is intolerant to cold. There may be undue weight gain irrespective of the restricting the diet. There may be water retention in the body. The body feel bloated and water retention. There may be hoarseness of voice, because as we know, thyroid gland is situated in front of the windpipe. It interfere in the proper phonation and there is hoarseness of voice. There may be fatigue and lethargy. Undue fatigue, unexplained fatigue, and lethargy means it is inability to work and concentrate. There may be excessive sleep also. Some other common features are indigestion and bloating feeling. Even after 6 to 8 hours of taking lunch, the lady feels like she has just taken the lunch. That no the fullness in the stomach, because it will slow down intestinal movement forward. Second and commonest thing in teenage girl usually is menstrual irregularities. When teenage girl is caught with the thyroid dysfunction, most of them present to us with the scanty periods, irregular periods, or it may be continuous bleeding. There may be sometimes frequent abortions and preterm birth. If we get the history and then there is previous history of abortions or premature birth, then we have to consider the subclinical hypothyroidism, which has not been identified at that time. Now, magnitude. Spontaneous hypothyroidism is 1 to 2% and is 10 times more common in female than in male. As we already told, 8% have subclinical hypothyroidism. That means there is no less amount of T3 and T4, but only the TSH is raised. Prolactin may increase with the, we have already discussed, I think Dr. Chirag has discussed regarding prolactin. Prolactin, which may increase because it is produced from the same anterior pituitary gland, and it may increase with the hypothyroidism because TRH receptors also stimulate prolactin. Now, thyroid function test during pregnancy. For those who are known hypothyroid, those who have already been caught during their teenage or the earlier menstrual irregularities that they are stamped having hypothyroidism, TSH level should be under control before they plan pregnancy and should be rechecked as soon as pregnancy occurs along with anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies. We will call it anti-TPO antibodies. So this antibody test we will do because it will have a lot of significance in the fetal outcome, in the pregnancy outcome, and in the fetal development also. For normal patient, even having no such hypothyroidism being diagnosed, TSH should be done in early pregnancy. If normal reference range is up to 4.2 micro IU per ml in non-pregnant ladies, it should be below 3 or even in early pregnancy below 2.5 as soon as pregnancy is diagnosed. This decrease in TSH value in pregnancy is because there is persistent increase in HCG levels, and HCG also stimulate thyroid similar to TSH. Now, we may not go in much detail, but we just explain you on the screen. The red line shows rise in the HCG level as pregnancy occurs, And along with it, there is mirror image of, if you see the TSH level, that is green line is getting less. So in early pregnancy, TSH level should go down as there is pregnancy growth. If it is not, then it indicates subclinical hypothyroidism. This is free T3 and T4 level, and this is thyroid binding globulin. May not be very, very important for a non-medical person. To understand this much is enough. Now, thyroid physiology during normal pregnancy and factors that affect it. There are multiple factors which affect thyroid physiology. So, already we have discussed few, and few we will be discussing later. There's increased renal iodine clearance, decreased plasma iodine and placental transport, iodine transport to the fetus, increased oxygen consumption by the fetoplacental unit and the uterus. Second thing is there is high increase in HCG, which again decreases the TSH level. There is increase in serum thyroid binding globulin, increase in plasma volume, blood volume, which is 4.5 liter for a non-pregnant lady will become almost 6 liter. And these are the factors which identify or which will reveal even the metabolic stress on the lady and may bring out as a subclinical or the hypothyroidism, subclinical hypothyroidism. Now, very important is a guideline. We have each and every country has, according to their population generalization, their cutoff value, that is trimester specific reference range, which is recommended. For Indian purpose, for our purpose, if it is first trimester, that is up to conception of pregnancy to first 12 weeks, it should be 2.5 milli international unit per liter or less. Second trimester, it should be between less than 3 milli international unit or less. And third trimester, again, it is 3. Almost it is same in the European and American standard also. Now here, upper limit if we consider 2.5 milli international unit per liter in the first trimester and 3 is in the second and third trimester. But in Asia and India and Netherlands, we have demonstrated only a modest reduction in the upper reference limit. So there is up to 3. The importance is when it is about 3 milli international unit per ml, then we have to consider thyroid peroxidase antibody, and we will decide that whether we should start treatment to level who is having 3.1 or 3.2, or should we repeat it, right? Now, autoimmune thyroid disease in pregnancy, we will discuss. For autoimmune, we will be discussing thyroid peroxidase antibody, which reflects thyroid autoimmunity. Thyroid peroxidase antibody positively consistently associated with the miscarriage and preterm delivery. It is otherwise not important for non-medical person, but why the doctor is asking for antibody titer, the reason being it has its importance with the preterm delivery and miscarriages. So when it is around 3 TSH level in early pregnancies, 3.2, 3.5, we may ask to go for in detail regarding the antibody, autoimmune antibody also. Now, this is again TPO antibody positivity. There are different studies, but we may not go in detail. Only important is first and second trimester, the association is as if there is anti-TPO antibody positive, there are lot many possibility of premature rupture of membrane, water break, which becomes evident earlier than 36 weeks of pregnancy. There may be chances of miscarriage. There is more chances of perinatal mortality, that means intrauterine death, stillbirth babies, and post-delivery problems to the child. These are important things, and there is spontaneous preterm delivery in case if there is diabetes associated with the thyroid dysfunction. So this is important. Only important thing is this can end up in lot many complications to the mother and child. So we have to go for it if it is borderline TSH high. Now we will be understanding if the thyroid peroxidase antibody positive, then replacement for this is a study which may exclude, but TSH level above 4, the thyroid peroxidase antibody positivity is 30% instead of there is 6 times more than normal population. And replacement therapy with levothyroxine in thyroid antibody positive pregnant women with normal free T4 level improves pregnancy outcome and it beneficial in reducing the preterm delivery. So I think it decides for you the practical purpose. It is important to help the clinician to continue pregnancy till full term with the healthy uh, birth and the home carrying baby rate if the thyroid peroxidase antibody has been tested and the treatment has been given accordingly. Now, hypothyroidism and adverse pregnancy outcomes. We enumerated the adverse pregnancy outcome and everyone is feared, and that is the importance of antenatal care where the clinician is vigilantly watching the thyroid level and if required the treatment is being started. So these are the study and its outcome in which overt maternal hypothyroidism, we call it overt is when the only TSH level is high and T3 and T4 levels are normal, has consistently been shown to be associated with the increased risk of adverse pregnancy complication as well as detrimental effect upon the fetal neurocognitive development. There may not be any other problem in continuing or pregnancy till full term and the delivery and but the child's IQ is less. So here we will be understanding outcome abortion. 60% of untreated overt hypothyroid patient may end up in abortion. There may be 22% rise in the gestational hypertension. Pregnancy induced hypertension rate will increase if it is not been diagnosed and treated. There is chances that fetal death rate will significantly increase if there is hypothyroid patient. And very important is full scale IQ scores in their children average 7 points lower than those who have normal TSH values. So neurocognitive development is very important, where the fine movements of the muscles, say the holding of a pencil, coloring, handwriting, which are the higher functions of the brain, which child may lose if the thyroid uh, hypothyroidism, which is overt hypothyroidism, is not being detected during early pregnancy and has not been taken care of. So I think very important is because now in regular routine outdoor practice, we see lot of resistance from patient and relatives that it is only 3.2. Why should we start thyroid? So we will discuss that. No, that common question. What is which are frequently asked question and its answer later on. Now, this bar graph will give us overt and subclinical hypothyroidism and in Indian pregnant ladies and it effects on the maternal and fetal outcome. So here the maroon color is overt hypothyroidism and yellow is subclinical hypothyroidism and the blue is the control. We can see that this will increase chances of anemia. Hypothyroidism will induce anemia. It will induce pregnancy, induce hypertension. That is, the lady will start rising her blood pressure from 7th month onwards or even 5 months onwards. There may be gestational diabetes, which is more with the overt hypothyroidism. There may be intrauterine growth retardation. The child which is almost full 40 weeks or 38 weeks, the full term child is having birth weight of only 1.8 or 2.2 kg and there is less of fat deposition in the liver. We call it growth retardation or intrauterine growth retardation and even the high incidence of intrauterine death. So overt and subclinical hypothyroidism in Indian study indicates it is so important to get it corrected. Now perinatal outcome and delivery in neonatal variables. Here is the perinatal means the child which is being affected. There is more chances of preterm delivery in overt hypothyroid. There is more chances of C-section, cesarean section delivery because of fetal distress. Overall incidence of cesarean section rises because of the overt hypothyroidism and subclinical hypothyroidism. There may be Apgar score, that is at birth child's the scoring system, that the child is okay at birth, having good oxygenation and respiration, that is we call it Apgar score. Less than 7 is more common in overt and subclinical hypothyroidism, and neonatal complication is again more in the such group. So ultimately we just put it in single line. Just forget the bar graph if you are getting confused. So we have a meta-analysis of 7 such studies which reported relevant data on the association between the subclinical hypothyroidism and intrauterine growth retardation. And it showed that subclinical hypothyroidism is associated with intrauterine growth retardation. It is to be identified and it has to be treated. So that again, this is another subclinical hypothyroidism, systemic review and meta-analysis. Pregnancy loss, it is more. Premature rupture of membrane is more, and neonatal death it is again more, right? So we have to identify. Now these are the consensus. That means that all studies which has concluded, and this is to be considered as a fact. We will just read it as a single line understanding message. We are not going for the in detail because it itself is a full book. All pregnant female should be screened at first antenatal visit by measuring her TSH levels. That is very, very important. Second thing is, following the high risk groups, screening should be also including anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Personal history of thyroid or autoimmune disorders, suppose history of other autoimmune disease, previously identified thyroid dysfunction, family history of thyroid disease in parents or elder sister or the female relatives of the lady, or woman with the goiter, that is swelling of the thyroid gland, or history of miscarriage. These are the group whose anti-thyroid peroxidase antibody test should be done in early pregnancy. Treatment of overt hypothyroidism is recommended during pregnancy, and pregnant women with the TSH concentration more than 2.5 milli international unit per liter should be evaluated for the anti-thyroid peroxidase antibody status. So again the same. Now this clinical and the analytical data indicates that anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies are positive. These ladies are, if given levothyroxine treatment for specific subgroup, the strength of such recommendation is, however, should differ depending on the thyroid peroxidase antibodies. If we just explain that if we start the dose of thyroxine to those who are antibody positive, they are having better maternal and the fetal outcome. Now, management of hypothyroidism with the levothyroxine or the thyroxine. In India, it is more available as thyroxine. In other countries, European countries and America, it is levothyroxine. Now, if we just conclude the previous slide, between 50% and 85% of levothyroxine treated hypothyroid women need to increase their exogenous levothyroxine during pregnancy. So as pregnancy increases, as we understood in the previous diabetes lecture, that the total weight gain of pregnancy is about 9 to 11 kg or up to 14 kg depending on the body mass index. As the body mass increases, thyroxine requirement may increases. So we need to go for the repeat level also. Following delivery, thyroxine should be reduced to the patient's preconception dose. So what the lady was taking before, Additional thyroid function test should be done at about 6 weeks post delivery. Now we are, so that was the fetal, that is newborn, intrauterine, and the maternal outcome with the subclinical and the overt hypothyroidism and thyroid dysfunction. Now we are discussing something which is thyrotoxicosis. There is excessive thyroid production. There are different issues which are very less common than hypothyroidism. One is gestational transient thyrotoxicosis. This is pregnancy induced. This may be due to high level of HCG, and it is found in 1 to 3% of the pregnancies. So this occurs in any condition leading to striking increase in the HCG, like twin conception or triplet conception or molar pregnancy. Here distinctive feature is there is absence of the thyroid antibodies, and the TSH level is, and the T3 T4 level is too high. Commonly associated with the hyperemesis, and it's not associated. There is lot of vomiting, and sometimes the patient is caught. There is Graves' hyperthyroidism. There is another condition which is prevalent in 0.5% of the level, in which TSH level goes very low, and again it is associated with the thyroid storm. There may be growth retardation, premature birth, again pregnancy-induced hypertension and growth retardation. So thyroid dysfunction in hyper or hypo, both way it is going to interfere in the perinatal outcome and the maternal complications. Now, if we give anti-thyroid drugs in such patients who have excessive thyroid production, if we give the drugs, this drug itself have association with the facial malformation and mild urogenital malformation of the fetus. So the clinician is always aware about if the lady is on the treatment of hyperthyroidism, then we are little aware about the screening the fetus. Now the drugs, there are different drugs for the hyperthyroidism, that is propylthiouracil, and there may be mercazole, methizole and neomercazole. This is given according to the label, and the clinician will decide about it. Now we will go for the commonly asked question in outdoor. What exactly is the the lady is thinking and the family is thinking? So we will be discussing it in a question form only. First question is, how frequently should I check the thyroid levels? Now, first report is always advisable in early pregnancy. Initially, when titration of the dose is required, report may be required at interval of 25 to 30 days. And once stabilized, the repeat report is done at 16 and 28 weeks according to necessity. Now, second question is, will it affect my fetus? That is very, very important to each and every lady. Now, undetected and untreated hypothyroidism can lead to number of complications and has been implicated for the defective neurocognitive development of the child. So, undetected and untreated hypothyroidism in neonatal patients and even after birth has been implicated as the biggest reason for the mental retardation in third world countries, including India. Third question is, if hypothyroidism is detected during pregnancy, do I need to take it after delivery or not? So most of the cases of clinical hypothyroidism require to take care, and the medication is continued up to most of the time lifetime, depending on the blood reports, but it is done again after 6 weeks after the delivery. Some cases of subclinical hypothyroidism may revert back to normal and may not need further supplementation. It depends again on the report. So we may go for the repeat report after 6 weeks. Now, another commonly asked question: does my child need to be tested for thyroid or not? Hypothyroidism is the most common thyroid disorder in babies, kids, and even in teenage. So routine testing at birth uncovers hypothyroidism in 1 in every 1500 newborns, or about 3000 newborns. Early diagnosis and treatment of the thyroid hormone deficiency is crucial to ensure normal physical development and the normal brain development. Screening is part of all newborn screening program, and hypothyroidism can also develop later in childhood or in the teenage, and the risk is 4 times higher in girls than in boys. So we enumerated the common symptoms. If the mother finds any of the symptoms, that excessive weight gain, too much obesity, sleepy, and indigestion, constipation, then the mother can ask for the test. Now, will it affect my baby in future? This is another question. There is genetic predisposition. 75% of the time, in patient's history, there is a family history having thyroid, some family member having thyroid dysfunction. As it is autoimmune, it can have hereditary link as well as association with the other autoimmune disorders also. So early studies should found that children born to mothers with the hypothyroidism during pregnancy and lower IQ and impaired psychomotor or mental and physical development, if properly controlled, often by increasing the amount of thyroid hormone, women with the hypothyroidism can have the healthy and unaffected babies. So, uh, carrying home messages, if there is overt or subclinical hypothyroidism, TSH level is high and the T3 and T4 levels are normal. Even if the clinician advocate to go for the thyroid supplementation, please start it as it is good for the child's neurological development, and we may go for the repeat test and titrate and may increase or decrease the dose depending on the label. So any questions? Thank you very much. And any questions any of the no participant is having, we can answer the questions. No.
There is a question. Thyroid.
थायराइड में प्रेगनेंसी कंटिन्यू नहीं कर सकते.
Why not? We have to control.
Darshana Talvi, right? Pregnancy can be continued. If thyroid dysfunction is there, then that is going to remain even after a year or two when you plan pregnancy later on. So it is better to control thyroid dysfunction and continue pregnancy, but you should correct your thyroid dysfunction earliest.
Okay.
सेकंड क्वेश्चन इज थायराइड हो तो प्रेगनेंसी कंटिन्यू नहीं हो सकती, अगर कंटिन्यू करनी हो तो क्या करना चाहिए? आई थिंक आई हैव एक्सप्लेन. आपको इमीडिएटली थायराइड लेवल को नॉर्मल करवाने के लिए जो भी क्लिनिशियन दवाई दे वो लेना चाहिए और रिपीट लेवल करवा के उसका डोज सेट करना चाहिए. If you have any questions, you can ask. Okay. Thank you.
I think thank you, Dr. Chirag Amin and Dr. Meena Amin.
Yes.
For such informative webinar.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you, sir.